right there is a B-2 Spirit stealth bomber from Freewing.
It's only invisible to radar, Bubba. It's in the truck.
It is not in the damn truck. It's right here. It's got like a cloaking mode like Star Trek. You can't see it. It's like Bigfoot. Everybody knows it's real. You just can't see it.
What's up, everybody? You're watching Model AV8R. My name's Adam, and this is the Freewing B-2 Spirit Stealth Bomber. It's a twin 70mm. You already know that unless you live under a rock. You can get yours at Motion RC for a pretty hefty price. There is some debate as to whether or not this airplane is worth that hefty price. All I can say is it's a very, very large model. There's a lot of tech in it, and when it comes to unique, well, you couldn't ask for more unique than this. Personally, having already flown it, I think it is well worth that price if you are into something like this. Now, that said, we have to thank our friend Carl Panke, who paid that hefty price to get this airplane. He wanted to add one to his hangar, couldn't resist, and he was nice enough to loan it to us for review. Now, Carl is one of many people that I help. I help a lot of folks with getting airplanes set up. I do a lot of maidens for a lot of people. I fly a lot of different airplanes. I'm into a lot of different genres. All types of scale airplanes, from general aviation, bush planes, World War I, World War II, post-war, EDF. I fly sport planes. I fly 3D. I do a little bit of everything, and because of that, and because I like to help a lot of people, I'm blessed. A lot of people trust me with their airplanes. A lot of people want my help, and I get to fly hundreds of different airplanes. Now, that said, I have never set up or flown anything like this. I've set up flying wings, but a nitroplane's pop wing and this thing are miles apart. There's a lot of tech in this. It can be very complicated if you don't understand it, and it was quite exciting for me to be able to learn something new that I didn't have any experience with. This was really, really kind of a cool process for me. I really, really enjoyed it. So first, I think we need to go over the assembly, and that could not be simpler. There's one or two parts that you have to glue on depending upon what you want to do. The first part is the little point on the end of the wing. I guess that's the end of the fuselage, or maybe the end of the center trailing edge. Since it's a flying wing, I'm not really sure what you call it, but you glue that on. The other thing that you can glue on, if you so choose, is this little clear vertical. Obviously, it's non-functional. It goes right here if you want to use it, given the size of this wing and the size of this, which is smaller, literally less than half the size of a single SFG, side force generator, on a 48-inch 3D plane, which is kind of small. I'm not really sure what this will do for this large wing other than make you feel better about it and know that you have a vertical there. We didn't use it. The plane flew great without it. Quite a few people don't use it. I wouldn't feel like that you have to have that on there, and some of us have flown it in the wind without it, and it did just fine. But there you go. You can glue it on if you choose, and that is all there is to the assembly. The wing panels, that's essentially field assembly. The two wing panels have carbon fiber tubes built in, one plug, you plug up for everything, 2 bolts underneath, and you're done. That's it. Could not be simpler as far as the assembly. Obviously, you have to put your receiver in, but that's not too complicated either. But that's where the simplicity ends. The B-2, being as unique as it is new territory for most of us when it comes to setup. It's definitely not your average Cub or P-51. The setup on this thing can be daunting and a bit complicated compared to other things that you've set up. Thankfully, there's some resources we can tap into to get us there. One of the first things that you're going to have to do is make sure that all these control surfaces are moving in the direction that they're supposed to. And it helps to understand what those control surfaces are and what they're supposed to be doing on an airplane like this. So, for the sake of conversation, I'm not sure if Northrop calls these control surfaces what I'm going to call them, but here's what we're going to call them. The two inboard surfaces are elevators. The two center surfaces are ailerons, and the two outboard surfaces are drag rudders. Now, when you use the elevators, there's a mix. There's also a mix with ailerons. This airplane comes with a pre-programmed control board as well as a pre-programmed gyro. Everything is supposed to be set up for you. I found that I had to do a little bit of work to get it set up right. Actually, a lot more work than I thought, but that's okay. When you're finished setting it up, this is what you want the control surfaces to be doing. When you pull back and push on the elevator, you're going to notice that the elevators and the ailerons are mixed. They'll both come up or down, obviously depending upon what you do. When you move your rudder left, your left drag rudder is going to open as your right drag rudder closes. Obviously when you go right, the opposite is going to happen. At rest with gimbal in the center, they're going to be slightly open the way you see them here. That's normal. Now the way a drag rudder works, for those of you that don't know, when you move left rudder, this drag rudder opens up and creates drag on this side. It cleans up that side, so this wing actually flies faster than this one, and that swings the airplane around. That controls the yaw axis, not in the same way, but in the same principle as a rudder. When you use the ailerons, there's a pretty elaborate mix. You'll notice as I use the aileron, every single surface is moving. Both the elevator and aileron come up, as well as the drag rudder on the side that you're moving to actually opens up to help slide the airplane around. Now we'll talk about using rudder when flying when we get to that part, but now we just want you to understand that's the way the control surfaces and the mixes are supposed to work when you get the airplane set up. Now to get there, it was interesting. When I plugged everything into the receiver, bound it to the airplane, none of the surfaces were doing what they were supposed to. I might have two of them doing the right thing, and then the other four were wrong. It doesn't say anything in the manual about reversing the direction in the transmitter of servos. It does, however, mention that there are two elevator plugs that we're going to show you now. If the elevators are moving incorrectly, try flipping those. You just unplug them and plug them in opposite. If the ailerons are not working properly and the mix isn't working properly, these are the two aileron plugs. They want you to exchange those, flip those, try reversing those and see what happens. No combination of those two things would render these control surfaces moving and mixing exactly the way they were supposed to, other than when I found the combination of moving the plugs and reversed in my transmitter, my aileron and my rudder servo. When I did that, all the mixes worked properly, everything moved in the right direction, and I was well on my way to a point. The next thing you're going to need to do after you get everything going in the right direction is set your reflex, which is up elevator, which you'll do with the elevators and the ailerons, and you need to mechanically adjust your drag rudders for their position at rest, as well as their position fully open and fully closed, depending upon which way you're turning. All these mechanical adjustments have to be made just so to certain measurements, and the best resource I've found for that is the RC Air Marshal's channel. If you look at his channel, he is essentially showing you a very quick, easy, and well-explained way to get to the setup that everyone is using. The SOLT setup essentially is what he's doing. He just found a way to get through it without so much trial and error, and he explains a few things about programming in the transmitter and some measurements better than anybody I've seen explain it thus far. It was crystal clear to me what I needed to do when I watched his videos, so do that. Once you get those two things done, the next thing you're going to have to do before you maiden the airplane is make sure that the gyro is correcting in the proper direction, that all of the control surfaces are moving in the proper corrective direction as you move the airplane. Now, one of the things that tells you in the manual, the only mode that you're supposed to fly this airplane in is with the light on, and that's just normal gyro. There's supposed to be a self-correcting mode and some other mode, I'm not even sure what it is. They don't recommend using that, And when I flipped it into those, let me tell you, the way things corrected was kind of funky and not always correct. But with the red light on, everything corrected the proper way except the inboard elevators. When I pitched the airplane, these were correcting improperly, and the two ailerons, which are mixed in with elevator, were actually correcting properly. That concerned me. It made me think maybe reversing those servos wasn't the right thing. But the crazy thing is, I didn't reverse the elevator. I started thinking, well, maybe I should. So I started moving plugs around again and went through about 30 minutes of crap that I didn't have to go through, trying to find the combination. I ended up right back where I started, with the plugs exactly where I had them, with my rudder and my aileron reversed in my transmitter and the elevator normal. So I reached out to somebody. I called Brent Hecht. He has a YouTube channel called Hecht Speed. He and his father Roger worked for Northrop, actually worked on the B-2 program, so they know a little something about the airplane. Brent also is a phenomenally good, versatile RC pilot, flies all kinds of things, really good at setup, super good builder. He and Roger are great builders. He took me through what he did in his transmitter, and as it turns out, we had done the same thing. We came to the same conclusion that the combination we had was the only way to get everything working. And interestingly enough, at this point, Brent had already flown his airplane. I'd seen the fruits of Brent's labor, seen the airplane fly great. He's a great pilot, but it still flew great. So I wasn't too concerned when he told me that his inboard elevators were also correcting the wrong way. I don't know, again, if those two cancel each other out. Maybe it's just that it's only a 5% gain mix on elevator. I don't know. All I know is his airplane flew well, and after he told me that, I felt good about it. One other quick tip that he gave me was to take the landing gear off, remove the suspension springs, and cut 2.5 or 3 coils off the springs, put them back in. That allows the airplane to sit crouched ever so slightly, just a little bit nose up instead of either level or nose down. You've seen some of the videos where guys jump off the ground when they're doing their maiden on this airplane. Brent explained to me that allows you to get a nice, good, smooth scale rotation, and he's right, it does. So we also did that. So thank you, Brent, for that. It was an ominous, foggy Monday morning when we took this airplane out. It really made this menacing shape in and of itself even more menacing. It was pretty perfect, to be honest. Probably not the best conditions to be doing a maiden in, but we had enough visibility to be able to get it done. And we had a guest on camera. My buddy Ramel from Desert Fox Productions, which is another YouTube channel. Couldn't have been a better person to fill in for Heidi since she couldn't be there that Monday morning. She had to work. Ramel shoots a lot of EDFs and turbines out at Georgia Jets where we tested the B-2, and he's a perfect person to film this. Worked out really good. We got some really good footage. So Ramel, thank you. We'll put a link to his channel, Desert Fox Productions, in the description, so check his channel out. A lot of great jet action on that channel. So, when it came to the maiden program, if you will, I consider maidens test flights. It's always my first flight with that airplane, so I take it seriously enough to at least have in my mind's eye what I'm going to do. And one of the things that we always do, and we've talked about on the channel before when we made an airplane, that first test flight, you want to stall test the airplane. You want to see how slow you can get it. Well, after we've done all the talking about doing that on the channel, we didn't do that with this airplane. And the reason is Brent and Roger Hecht. We were just talking about those two brilliant gentlemen, and they worked for Northrop, and I actually asked them point blank, would you stall it? Did you stall it? Brent didn't stall his, and he and Roger shared with me via some comments, actually on one of Brent's videos of his B-2, that Northrop did not actually fully stall the actual B-2 during their testing program. They took it to the stick shaker to what the computer said would be close to a stall, but they never fully stalled it. They were concerned that in this configuration it could possibly enter a flat spin and you might not be able to recover. So with a $2 billion per aircraft airplane, you don't take those risks. Now, we could have with a model, and to be honest, I'm a pretty curious guy. If it were mine, I'd probably done it just to see what happened, but it isn't. It's Carl's, so we didn't stall it. And that made the first couple of landing approaches pretty interesting because I didn't know how well the airplane slowed down. So another thing that Brent definitely told me, really good advice. I've heard this before about this airplane, and that is if you doink a landing, if you bounce it a bit, just throttle up and go around. Don't even try to save it. Just hit the throttles and try again. And so when I bounced it on the maiden flight, that's exactly what we did, and that worked out just fine. You just have to kind of get used to landing the airplane, but we'll narrate a bit during the flying footage, tell you kind of what I was thinking during the flight. You're going to see some of the maiden, definitely the first takeoff, the first landing tries, and then the first actual landing, and then you'll see our second flight in its entirety in this ominous fog. It's pretty cool. Check it out, and we'll see you back here on the bench to sum this thing up. Here we're taxiing out for our maiden takeoff. Pretty uneventful, which is good. So after getting her trimmed out, this is the first landing attempt, my first approach. And I followed the suggestions from many to just go around if you bounce it and not try to save it. I think that's really good advice. It's really easy to get into pilot-induced oscillation and tear things up trying to save it with a flying wing. I do remember the old E-Flight Scimitar, which was a flying wing with landing gear, being very similar when you landed it. I didn't like how much runway I'd eaten up at that point, so just went around. And another bounce. The airplane's interesting. It floats until it doesn't. And you have to figure out when that's going to happen and bring the power in. It's not super difficult to land once you get used to it, but it's a matter of getting used to it. And there, I finally nailed it. The fog really added something to this morning. That's a pretty ominous, business-like shape for any warplane. You can just tell B-2 is serious business. We thought the fog might take away from what we were doing. We had some time constraints, so we pretty much had to fly in it. That meant that I had to fly a bit of a tighter pattern than I normally would have, but it worked out. What we thought might put a damper on the flight actually added to the mood, and we really liked it. A couple of things that surprised me about the B-2. The first was how fast it flies. I'm not at a particularly high throttle setting, pretty much half to maybe 60% cruise throttle, basically. And it gets around a lot faster than I thought it would. Part of that effect to me might be that I'm having to fly a tighter pattern. I'm just having to think about turning sooner than I normally would. That might have something to do with it. The other thing is how much rudder it takes to turn this airplane. Also, because I'm flying a tighter pattern and I'm turning a bit tighter than I normally would if I didn't have the fog, I'm really having to use a lot of rudder. Brett Hecht said that he thought it flew like a Cub, and while there's nothing about the B-2 that seems Cub-like, I know exactly what he meant, and I completely agree. You do have to coordinate your turns using a lot of rudder with the B-2 in the same way that you see people that fly Cubs well doing with a Cub. Don't misunderstand, I'm not saying the airplane flies bad. It actually flies really good. It's pretty easy to fly. It just requires some rudder skill and, of course, getting used to landing it. It's a little different, but good. That little bobble is as close as we came all day to stalling the B-2. I'm really fortunate I was getting on the power then anyway. Able to fly out of it pretty safely. But seeing that really helped. You'll see on this next landing and hear that I give it a burst of power at the perfect time and get the landing done. A little more stick time with the Stealth, and I think more consistent approaches would be pretty easy to do. Good flying airplane. Alright, hope you enjoyed the flying footage. Summing the B-2 up, it's just such a unique airplane. Obviously, they're going to be more commonplace now that a really noted company like Motion RC has not only released one, but released a really good one that works. You're going to start to see these things more, but it is still a pretty rare airplane now. It's so unique. It's such a conversation piece. If you pull one of these out of the field, people are going to gather around and take a look. Take it from me. Everybody is interested in what in the world you have here when you pull one of these out. Very, very cool. Is it a beginner's airplane? Obviously not. Is it a good first EDF? I don't think so. I think it would benefit you to have some rudder skill, some setup skill and confidence, as well as some EDF experience to fly this airplane. It's just a little different. It's not that the setup is impossible. It's not even all that complicated when you actually use the resources. There's just a lot of different resources out there. Hopefully this video has helped explain a few things and make a few things more clear to some people. I think RC Air Marshal's video on setting up the reflex and the drag rudders is the best one of those I've seen with the setup that seems to work for everyone. We're going to leave a link in the description to that video, so check that out. Use the resources. Take the advice of great pilots like Brent Hecht when they tell you if you bounce it, go around, don't try to save it. Have an idea in your mind. Think of it as a test flight. Decide what you're going to do. If this happens, what are you going to do? If that happens, what are you going to do? Have a plan, follow the advice, use your resources, and I think you'll be fine if you have a little experience under your belt. Obviously, you don't want to go from an apprentice to this. That's a pretty bad idea. That said, you can get yours at Motion RC. We'll leave a link there. We're going to leave a link to Brent's channel, Hex Speed, and we'll leave a link to my buddy Ramel's channel, Desert Fox Productions. Check their content out. Pretty doggone awesome. I think you'll really enjoy all those channels. Hope you've enjoyed this video. Please like, comment, and subscribe. And hopefully we'll see you next week when we'll have something else pretty doggone cool with wings. And maybe a fuselage.